We spent 24 hours trying to figure out the best tier list on the market. All the buffs, all the nerfs, and everything you need to know absolutely simplified so you can just play, pick, and do whatever you want. Let's start with the Baron lane. Here we have for carries the Camille pick. Camille is still one of the most strongest champions you can have in the Baron lane. Next to her, Fiora feels very powerful with the new rune changes, and Jax is just obnoxious, especially into champions like Ornn. Other champions below in the A tier are just substantially weaker and don't do anything compared to the champions above. Champions in the B tier are just generally stay away from them. They're not good enough. They don't do anything, way too high risk and way too little payoff. For the tank tier, we have Ornn in the pinnacle. He is still the most strongest champion. Even after the slight changes, he'll still take you on, tank your entire team, CC them, and you'll just simply die. Other champions below are simply similar in terms of strength, at least laning wise, but overall they cannot even dare to compete with Ornn in the terms of presence, power level, and basically everything there is. However, you should never underestimate the power of Shen with his global presence, the damage potential of a Garen with his ultimate and first ability and ignite, and just Mundo beefing you down because this champion's damage, if he gets to auto-attack you reliably, is simply not balanced. Now let's move over to the most problematic role, the jungle role. Here we have in the pinnacle, the best tier, the SS tier, we have Kayn, and Evelynn should also be in there. Both of these champions are disturbingly broken, and there's not much you can do against them. For Kayn, it's still the same old story. You start with Shimmering Spark, get your form as fast as possible, even if you have to int, and then once you're blue or red, you'll take over the game and win for free. If you're in a game where you can take blue form, losing is barely possible. Your damage is too absurd, you sit in walls, you spam your second ability, and you're done with it. On the other hand, Evelynn is one of the most problematic champions thanks to the Boots upgrade. With Boots of Mana, Sudden Impact and Prophet's Pendant, you pay 2,400 gold for 33 pen. Adding to the mix that you have magic resistance percentage threat on your second ability will turn any enemy into a squishy champion. You literally one-tap them. Other champions that can also utilize First Strike are just very powerful. First Strike in general in solo queue on assassin-like champions, especially in the jungle department, are just taking over as you accelerate way too fast for the game's current pace. Once you're ahead, you'll one-tap anyone and simply win. Other champions that are lower in the A tier simply cannot do this as reliably or are just not AP champions. Champions such as Olaf and Wukong are simply not as powerful as the other picks presented. It doesn't mean that they're bad, or even champions like Pantheon can really work well if they're snowballing, but it's just so much easier to snowball with any champion from the S or SS tier compared to the A or B tier. There's also one thing I have to mention, it's about Nyla. Nyla is a jungle champion, or rather an AD carry that can be played in the jungle department, and is not even too weak. Her first clear in both directions is about 1 minute and 50, so she's rather fast for a full clear, and she scales really well if you use the proper build. If you watch our full Nyla guide, you can find out everything you need to know, and then you have an easy time snowballing games without any effort. For the tank champions, we have a slight change. Instead of Rammus, we now have Volibear in the top tier. This champion's damage is quite not really balanced, and his ability to go into tank, bruiser and even AP hybrid is quite interesting. However, Rammus isn't really a weak champion, and Shen surely isn't also a weak champion. Both of these champions still have their places, but Volibear just feels more consistent in the way you can snowball and be active in games compared to the other champions you have. And in all honesty, the champion in the A tier, for example the Jarvan, could be probably put into the carry tier with a First Strike build. But don't get me wrong, champions like Amumu are not necessarily bad, because you can solo Baron still, right? And therefore this champion has his place and probably won't die unless the enemy is already giga fed. But still, the Amumu is still less consistent than the other champions in the above tier, but is not a weak pick at all. For the mid lane, we have Zoe as the best champion. This champion has access to the previously mentioned Boots of Mana pen build that also Evelynn utilizes. Every champion that can utilize this very well is very powerful. However, champions that are non-committal are still the name of the game, as if you get too close, you'll just instantly die. Therefore, champions in the S tier like Orianna, Lux and Veigar are still very powerful even with the recent Lux nerfs. Don't get me wrong, the Lux nerf is actually kind of impactful, but it just makes her less good. It doesn't make her weak or anything, she is still powerful and it should still be regarded exactly like this. Champions in the A tier, however, are way less consistent and way more committal. You can always argue that Annie might be put one tier above, and Karma as well, But to be fair, the other champions in the S tier are still better, so to make a clear distinction between champion strength, I think the A tier is better suited for them. Champions in the B tier, however, are absolutely wasted. They don't do anything, so please stay away from them. The only exception, however, is if you would be one-tricking a champion. For example, Aurelion Sol will yield great results if you're one-trick playing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of games in Grandmaster Elo. Because you're playing against worse people, you'll get way better results than you're used to because your champion is permanently able to roam around the map like any assassin. For the mid lane assassins, we have Zed as the strongest champion. With all the changes to runes and items in the past, this champion is still very strong and takes over games super easily because bot lane always goes 0-10 if you have this champion. Other champions in the S tier are still very strong but less reliable. With the exception of Diana's newest build option, which is also Boots of Mana, she just literally one-taps you. Another thing that you have to consider is the similar build on Katarina. Katarina can also technically utilize this build with Prophet's Pendant, Boots of Mana and Sudden Impact, but obviously she might die very fast as she has no tools to her self-defense. Other champions I'm not too certain about yet because I haven't seen many people perform well on them yet are Echo and Fizz. Both these champions can fundamentally abuse the same strategy and therefore way stronger, but I haven't seen them do so well so far. So these two champions, Fizz and Echo, you need to have your eye on them and look if they perform well because these champions could rise into the next tier list into way higher tiers, but that's just something you have to keep in mind. For the other tier, we have Jace in the very top. However, you can also put Corki there. Both of these champions fulfill one certain thing. They're able to poke like absolute demons. However, Corki is way less all-in. Corki doesn't have to do anything, Corki doesn't have to get close, Corki just has to sling spells. Obviously, in comparison to Jace, the frequency at which he can sling spells is way higher and therefore his impact is way more consistent. However, Jace's laning phase is way more brutal, and if you consider that the elo you're playing against people who are most likely having no idea about how to lane, you'll get them killed way easier with Jace than compared with Corki. But Corki is still one of the best champions you can pick up, so keep him in mind. Akshan, on the other hand, is only a lane bully. You need to snowball lane and you need one extra person to get something done. Champion on itself is fine, but he scales very badly into the later stages of the game, which makes him very risky to be picked up. Champions in the A tier, however, are just doing nothing for you in a sense of consistency. It's very reliant on the enemy draft, very reliant on your own skill level, and the payoff is very low compared to the effort you have to put in to make them shine. And champions in the B tier are just stay away. Now let's talk about the Dragon lane. Here we have Corki and Varus as the best possible champions you can pick. Varus in solo queue often doesn't yield too many good results, but Varus is an absolutely broken existence in this game. The same as I mentioned about Corki previously in the mid tier applies to the AD carry list. He is just too powerful, does too much, and just kills you without you being able to do anything. People might say, why isn't Kai'Sa in the highest possible tier? Compared to Kai'Sa, Corki is just way more consistent. Kai'Sa is super low range and only has a second ability as a super range tool. If she misses that, she has a high cooldown, then she can't do anything if she is not allowed to auto attack. And don't get me wrong, in many situations you'll be able to auto attack even though you're not allowed to. But fundamentally speaking, in many games you will never be allowed to auto attack simply due to enemies' champions. And then only being able to rely on your second ability will make you very vulnerable, one-dimensional, and weak. Corki, on the other hand, just kills the frontline, kills the backline, everything with AoE abilities, which is the biggest selling point of Corki compared to Kai'Sa. Champions like Nyla are very powerful if you learn how to play them, but her laning phase is not the strongest unless you're very good with her, and you need a specific build which you'll obviously get when you look at the Nyla guide. Champions in the A tier are less consistent, but feature certain strength that make them stronger than other champions. For example, MF is one of the strongest laners if you play her properly, but her scaling is compared to other champions not as potent. Other champions like Caitlyn need to win lane to just make you stronger and allow you to take over the game, but if you fail in doing so, nothing will happen, and Akshan is just a one-trick champion. For mages, yes, we have Lux again as the best champion. She got nerfed, yes I know, but it doesn't really matter. Her power levels are still absurdly high simply due to the fact that she can just aim your Q through a minion wave. Then her damage potential, it's way too high. You attack somebody once and the person instantly disappears, and her shield still has value. Even if it got cut down by 40% roughly, it's still very powerful. Just keep in mind she shields all of her allies including herself for a big amount of damage. Even after the nerfed version, it's still similar in strength like a Locket of the Iron Solari. With that in mind, it's very much damage reduction. Champions in the S tier, however, are similarly as strong in terms of damage, however the utility they provide is way lower. Champions such as Ziggs or Seraphine or Karma provide similar levels of damage, but they have other qualities. For example, Seraphine is very powerful into teams that want to engage into you because you just completely cockblock them. Karma, for example, can apply utility in the sense of shielding or lockdown with a second ability. Vigo on the other hand places his cage and destroys enemy melee compositions by making them unable to play, especially with the crowd control changes. Ziggs just throws bombs around and is completely non-interactive, and every champion in the A tier does everything the champion in the above tier does, but significantly worse. Now let's talk about the support champions. For the support role, for the engage tier, we have Rapunzel as the best champion. Crowd control is very broken right now, and the damage potential of this champion is still the highest, and he does it so fast. Champions in the S tier are locking you down for eternity, so basically not much change. Everything that was already strong is now just stronger. Champions in the A tier are less reliable. For example, a Leona is way less reliable than, for example, a Nautilus. An Alistar might be reliable, but he just goes in, and what else does he provide? For example, compared to a Galio or a Gragas, who have way more tools to get things done outside of a Proto Belt and WQ combo. For the Protect tier, we still have Lux as the best champion here. Don't forget, yes, Lux has been nerfed, as I said many times, but the shielding and power of this champion is still absurdly high, especially in a solo queue context. Champions in the S tier provide just more than other champions do. For example, Soraka got nerfed, yes, but she provides still the most in terms of what their champion provides compared to Sona. Sona is just a substantially worse Soraka in every way, and there's no point of picking Sona in the first place from my perspective. Lulu is just a cringe champion, Karma is a cringe champion, First Strike, First Ability and Explosion, Braum just denies everything that happens, and Janna is a monster. Yuumi is a very conditional pick, which requires your AD carry not to be an absolute demon, and then you're good to go. However, I would not pick these champions in solo queue, only in duo queue, trio queue or penta queue. And for the last tier, we have the carry in the support tier. Here we have Pyke still at the very best champions because of the proactivity this champion promotes. He can be anywhere at every time and just gets the game going. He doesn't want to lane, he only wants to lane if the enemy doesn't have stamina spells, because then he can just jump onto them and get them killed. Once he's level 5, he rotates around the map, uses stealth to his advantage and gets people killed. Other champions such as Senna do similar things, however she is a laning demon. She can be a level 1 in top lane, mid lane or in the dragon lane, it doesn't really matter. With Brutal and Kraken at her disposal, she will kill you, and there's not much you can do about this because this champion features healing, utility with rooting, and damage and auto attack cancels. If the Senna player really knows how to play this champion and itemizes properly into a tankier build, you'll never get her killed without dying for it. And while you're trying to do so, she'll simply kill you because her damage is unbalanced regardless of what items she builds.